Okay, Sherry, you ready to get started?
I'm ready.
Okay, if everybody could turn to page 12. Okay. We're on revenue for executive. There's really not much change for this year. Are there any questions on this page?
Nope.
Okay, moving on. Page 13. Expenditures. There's nothing very remarkable here unless anybody has a question.
This is Kevin. The regular pay dropped significantly. What was the cause of that?
Dale, you want to answer that one?
Sure. If you look back on page 102, it shows the labor distribution. And yeah, the big change here was previously the human resource person was in that 513 section under executive, and it was approximately 30% of that pay rate. So that's been shifted to other departments.
Any other questions? Yeah, Cliff.
Well, I noticed, and this is pretty much across the board in all of the sections, that the fuel prices are down from what we have had in actual time, and I was wondering why we're looking at where we're usually spending $650 to $650, and now we're only budgeting $500. And I noticed that was pretty consistent in all of the departments. Are we expecting a great cut in gas prices?
Well, if you look here where we're at on fuel as of August, we were at $242. We're just not spending as much money per gallon on gas as we were in previous years. So fuel prices have gone down. So we adjusted that down.
I also had that I had noticed that, and this is another one, that it's more than just an executive, but based on the preliminary budget of last year, I don't know what the final budget was, but based on the preliminary budget from last year, it looks like just about everybody got a 2% raise, which is understandable for cost of living and things. But it also looks like Lake, Novolosky, Henny, Garcia, and a couple of the other ones that were combined differently got something close to 9%. Is that something that was changed between last year's preliminary budget and that, or am I comparing the wrong columns, or what am I?
That's a good catch. We for all of the department heads, for Henny, Novobelsky, and the fire chief, I equalized their base pay with the police chief. I'm leaving that up to the council to decide. And the reason I did that was because the way that the mayor and I see this, it's a matter of equity and retention, paying all of our department heads who have, while not similar jobs, similar levels of responsibility, to keep them equalized. So it's out there for you. And for each one of them, for instance, Novobelsky, that's a monthly difference of $598. For Henny, it's a difference of $598. And for Hannah, it's $598. So those three all received or are have proposed pay raises in addition to the 2%, and that equalizes them with the police chief. Are we good, Cliff? Any more questions?
Not right now.
Okay, Jackie?
Sorry about the glare. Thank you, Don. I would just like to comment on that, and no disrespect at all to those department heads at all, but with our unemployment rate now at 9.7% for Yakima County, I think it would be challenging for us to have such a large increase. I understand what you're saying, Don, about equalization, but Chief Chrisman was hired with a contract at that wage, and my personal feeling is that we shouldn't just raise wages to make it even with them. I mean, I don't think that would be an appropriate thing to do. So that's my comment.
Understood. Just so everyone understands and registered, got it. This is not a decision brief. This is an informational brief. So no decisions will be made during this particular meeting or the next 2 meetings in the ensuing days. The decision-making period is when we meet in December on this particular budget. So please note, as Jackie Matson has said, you can form your own opinions, of course, and any deletions or adding or deletion to the budget will be done on that particular day. But certainly, I think it's very important for everybody to register their point of view during these meetings, so the rest of the council can understand where you're coming from. Any other questions? Yeah, Russ.
I echo Jackie and Cliff's thoughts there, and as I look at compare all of these positions, I see numerous positions that are getting 9%, 8% raises, and just have some concerns there.
Okay.
It's all across the board. I mean, it's all these different departments, but
I can cover all the raises, Russ, if everyone would like to hear them. All right, what I'll do is right now I'll go through the raise, the individuals that are proposed raises, and explain why. So what we did was we did an analysis of administrative support across the board in the city, and came to the conclusion that our clerks, our executive assistants, our folks that work out front and water and billing and payroll, they have fallen behind with regard to other employees in the city as well as across the state. So individuals such as Doreen Bigby, Anita Garcia, our court clerk, Monica Lake, and our new clerk, Angela Dale. What's her last name? I'm sorry, new one.
Dean.
Angela Dean. All 4 of those individuals were proposed for a $300 raise in addition to the 2%. This puts them really right at the bottom of the pay range on comparable salaries across the state in this particular field, executive assistants. So that's why we had that out there. Caprice Grew had a higher raise. Hers was at $631 a month. Her responsibilities changed as well as her performances increased. And Mr. Henney felt that she deserved that punch up. She If you recall, used to work at the front desk. She's moved to the back desk, and she's supporting more functions at Public Works. So, and those are the main individuals. Ty Jones also received a $225 raise. And that's it. Brandy Tucker got a $35 raise. That's about it. Unless anybody has any questions. Everybody on the staff got 2%, but that's per contract.
When we do have this discussion in council, I'd love to have those comparables city to city on each of those positions, please.
Mm-hmm. I have prepared packets for everybody for your review on that.
Thank you.
I'd also like to, we as a council, we fund positions and not individuals. The actual individuals that are filling those positions are administrative part. And when we're here to discuss what positions to be funding, we actually don't have in front of us a list of positions that we're funding. We have a list of names, and rightly so, their responsibilities are designated into different budgets, but it's very difficult to see what it is that we're actually funding when we only have a third of a particular person here and a quarter of them someplace else. That I'd like to see what positions it is, basically an org chart of the city and what is funded for those particular positions. The distribution of wealth, distribution of responsibilities and appropriate division of what part of their pay is rightfully administrative. But one of the most important parts of the council's responsibility, as I see it, is that the main way that we are able to set the priorities of the city is through the budget. And so with that list of raises and comparisons and things, I'd like to see what positions are actually being funded.
Okay, so if I could just read back what I think you're asking for is an org chart.
Basically.
Okay.
Well, I'm going to offer Don too. If you look back on the salary distribution pages 102 through 120 or so, it does show in the second column from the left the annual wage paid to that individual. Just that one, like Cliff says, if you're looking at the code enforcement department, for instance, it shows that of Fortner's $62,032 annual wage, only 32% is charged to Department 51, which is code enforcement. But it does show on there how much that position is being paid annually.
I understand that, but just looking at page 102, the top one, is Monica, and I see where her salary is, and that's where it was that I caught the raises, was in that second annual wage column. I happen to know that Monica is the whatever her title is, executive assistant.
Correct.
And and so I know her, but when you get down to a lot of the other employees, I don't necessarily know what position they officially hold.
Okay, I can certainly get you an org chart, no problems. Everybody.
Well, I'm going to suggest a cross-reference from a name to the position of that individual.
Yes. They're already done, so it'd just be a matter of sending it out to you. Any other questions on salary or raises across the board? Okay. And any other questions? I'm sorry, Jackie, go ahead.
Sorry, Don, a little late here. On, you've got two positions that are stated in here that are just new positions. Can you explain what those are? Since we don't have a chart in front of us, or will that come with the organizational chart?
We'll get you an org chart with those on there. Well, of course, we're looking at a new position over at Public Works. And I believe I mentioned it a couple of meetings ago. And that will be the position of an engineer technician at Public Works. And we're also looking at hiring another police officer. So,
Thank you.
yeah. Any more questions on executive? Okay, moving on. Dale, you want to handle that?
Certainly. So we're moving on to page 14, finance. Unfortunately, I have no revenues that are identifiable as to being received in the finance department. So page 15, expenditures. Salaries are down slightly, and that's due to the redistribution on the human resource costs. Operating supplies, I increased it by $250. So far this year, we spent $2231. I have had some, well, anyhow, we had a double shipment of envelopes, so we're good for envelopes for a couple years. So yeah, this year it went higher than what I wanted it to, but anyhow, it is what it is. Professional service wise, I've determined that I only need $2,000 less for next year than is currently budgeted for this year. IT services, that goes up by 4% per year under contract with the City of Yakima IT department. Telephone, I left alone. Postage costs, I increased by 100. Travel, I decided to reduce the 500. With the COVID this year, we haven't done any traveling. Insurance liability, I built in a small percentage. I don't recall, but it went up $600. So I think it was about 5%. The bond I left alone. That was the actual for the current year. And subscription and dues, I cut that, well, because of the, I believe the Yakima Herald was being charged there, and we've quit taking the Yakima Herald subscription. Audit services, to my knowledge, no auditors are supposed to show up next year, so I've not budgeted anything. And then under voter registration, I increased that to match what our bill was this year, which was almost $10,500.
Any questions? Go ahead, Russ.
Hey, Dale, and this is going to be, maybe a Don question across the board and maybe even a Kevin question. IT services, what's our total bill throughout all departments for IT that we do work with the City of Yakima?
Well, and that's where Yakima has quite the involvement. Not only the desktop computers, but they're the ones that maintain our website, all of the electronics, the communication equipment in the police cars. and some, I believe, in the fire trucks. Although the fire trucks, I think, are tablets now, and that's actually through Verizon. But best recollection I have, I believe we're paying around $70,000 a year. The cost per workstation right now is, I think it's still under $1,100 a year, but under this contract, it's gone up 4% per year. And then we no longer have on-site servers. They have what they call a virtual server set up down at Yakima, where I guess it even floats between two different pieces of hardware. If one goes down, it shifts over to another server. And I think the server cost is about, I'm going to say that's more like $2,000 to $3,000 a year for that element of the network. And then they provide all of our antivirus software, and and then we have the ability to submit help tickets into the Yakima IT desk over the internet if we have any special needs, any issues, problems at any workstation.
And I will add that we've been very satisfied recently with the support we've had from Yakima. It's one of the very functional relationships we've got. We have in years past did a review as to whether we could save dollars by running our own server, and it just doesn't pencil out. This is really the best deal we've got right now.
Yeah, I realize that I realize that there's been a good relationship there, but to me, this number seems high, and maybe I'm just not into the IT world enough to know what a dedicated person would be. I don't believe that I realize this isn't the cost of plugging in a modem, but I'm interested to see how that looks again, to see if that changes for $70,000 a year. I'm wondering if there's some updated software that can help us out there, or even somebody part-time, or even a contracted company to take a look at that for us.
If you would like, I can supply the cost that we charge for various services for comparison. I don't think they're too far out of the realm of what's reasonable. It's broken down. It gets broken down quite a bit. So I could supply you a cost comparison.
That'd be great. Thanks.
Yeah, Jackie.
Thank you. Dale, we don't have anything in for election services. We had 24,000 last year, or 75 last year, 7,500. So can you explain what that is?
Sure. And, the way that the county distributes election costs, Jackie, is based upon the number of individuals you might have running on the slate on the ballot. And for the current year or last fall, that was for the end of 19. The way they do it is that they bill the election costs well after the election, and usually in January following the November election. So in November of 19, I think we had like 5 council member positions that were up for re-election. And so that significantly, I budgeted 75 and ended up being almost $13,000, our share of the election costs based upon this method they use to distribute costs. My understanding for next fall is that we don't, at least I'm unaware of any positions that are going to be on the ballot.
Actually, we're going to have 4 on the slate.
Right.
4.
Okay, like I say, news to me.
So we'll have to adjust that up.
That was the only question. I just wanted to make sure that we had identified those costs. Thank you.
Yeah, it surprised me because on one of these appointments, I thought it was until the next general election. They said, oh no, they would serve the unexpired term. I don't recall what position that was, but yeah, I'll double check with the elections department at the auditor's office, and they can, make me aware as to, if it is 4 positions.
Good catch, Jackie. Thanks. Any other questions? Great. Okay, let's roll over to recreation and tourism. Zach, you there? Okay, what page are we on? We are on
39.
page 39. Okay, Zach, you got it.
All righty, jump right in. First, I want to say for everybody that Teresa is also available for questions. I jumped in as the recreation and tourism manager about a week before all of these budgets were due. So I've been working with her for the last couple months, but she's also available for questions. So, on page 39, we'll jump right in with revenues. The biggest difference you're going to see is Selah FC Soccer, which is 47.66. We are not planning on running 2 full soccer seasons next year as we would typically, specifically, due to Corona. But also WIA came out this morning with new recommendations for school districts, pushing their seasons back to first season beginning February 1st. So because we rely so heavily on school district facilities for all of our sports, we kind of just waiting to see what they do. So we don't anticipate being able to do any sports programs until late spring, early summer, most likely. And soccer, our spring soccer season would be in that late March, early April to May region. So we don't plan on being able to do that. So the revenue for that only shows what we might be able to do for the fall season. Same thing with the instructional soccer program. That's our little dribblers. They typically run a shorter season than our full soccer programs, but we're planning on the same thing, only being able to run that in the fall. You'll also notice a pretty significant difference between hot rods on First Street and the 4th of July, which are 67.05 and 67.06. For those, we are hoping to really be able to do something. If at all, if nothing less, just the fireworks. So we're trying to recruit some other groups in town to help us with some more entertainment stuff, which is typically where our revenue would come from, is vendor fees, that sort of thing. And with everything being so up in the air, we're not really sure what we'll be able to provide next year. Otherwise, we're really just trying to be mindful with everything for next year. So really, I don't know that there's anything else on page 39 with revenues.
Zach,
Yeah.
I do have an addition. We recently received a check, a $2,000 check from Pacific Power. It was a contribution for our 4th of July. So change for everybody, change line 367.05 from 1,500 to 3,500.
You're talking about 06 or 05?
I'm sorry, 06. Thank you. 06, 3,500.
Well, and actually, Don, since that check came in this year, it's going to be recognized as revenue this year.
Okay, so
Unless you're thinking they're going to be, I was surprised they paid that far ahead if that's for next 4th of July.
they had to give it to us before the end of the calendar year, but they wanted it designated for our 4th of July.
Okay. Well, it'll be in fund balance carryover when we go into next year. But
Okay.
since I received it this year, it will not be a revenue next year.
Fair enough.
Well, and since I'm talking where I'm getting a little older, my mind doesn't work as quickly. But on those election costs, for next year, there will not be any because we had nothing on the November 2020 ballot. Those items that are going to be on the November 2021 will be billed to us in January, February of 2022. So for next year, it's okay to have zero for election costs.
Okay. Roger?
Yes, I have just a comment on the rec revenue. It seems that we're still projecting pretty aggressively for revenue based against the actual of 2019, which was only 131, and yet we're still projecting 113 for this coming year. And I think, well, I'm not trying to put a downer on rec because we certainly need those activities in the community. I just think that we need to be prepared that those may not be realistic revenue numbers as we move into the year, especially with the projections right now that we're going to be into this COVID thing well into next year. And I understand you're recognizing that, Zach, and going through that in your numbers, but the number does seem a little high to me.
So if I could address that, Roger, just real quick. We are hopeful that we'll be able to run a full flag football season and a full basketball season next year. Flag football, typically we run in July and August. So if we get to the point to where, outdoor sports, even if it's in a limited capacity, are allowed, we're hoping we can run a full flag football program. So we didn't really change numbers on that much. And then with basketball is the end of the year sport for us. So we would, for example, this year we would be starting basketball in about 3 or 4 weeks. Starts in December, and then we run our basketball season in January and February. So we're hoping that with those two, we can still run 2 full seasons, one of flag football in the summer and then one basketball next winter. Crossing our fingers that, with COVID restrictions, maybe we're not dealing with those quite as heavily next year, at the end of next year anyways.
Zach, I have a similar question to Roger, and it's about the basketball. You're actually showing a $10,000 increase for next year. $10,000 based on. Let me rephrase that. Where'd it go? Based on 2018.
Yep.
We think that we're going to get that much increase on basketball.
So I've had multiple phone calls just throughout this year from people all over, from Selah, Yakima, West Valley, the Valley really, wondering if we are going to be offering any basketball this year. And just based off of just the sheer number of phone calls that I've fielded over the last 5 or 6 months, just specifically basketball. Our hope is that, with people not being able to play soccer in the spring, the potential of not being able to play flag football in the summer, that those people will be itching to get their kids playing something, and basketball is going to be that option for them. And basketball typically, aside from the fall soccer, is our biggest sport as far as participants go. So we're typically around that 400 and higher number for participants in basketball. So just with registration fees and the numbers of people that I think are going to start flooding in once things start to open, that's I think pretty much where that number came from.
Okay. That sounds good. And do we think we have the facilities to handle that much?
As long as the school districts are open, we do. I think I have a a really, really good working relationship with both athletic directors at the middle school and up at the high school, as well as the principals around, that it's not that difficult for me to ask for gym space and for them to approve and give it to me. So last year for basketball, we were in 5 of the 6 gyms in town. The only one we weren't in was the high school. So as long as the school districts are open and they're allowing people to reserve space, then we'll have more than enough room. Yeah.
And just your general motto and goal here, I guess, and I'm assuming this is across the board, is plan for the spending the money, and if restrictions shut us down, then we deal with it at that time.
Yep. We'll plan full steam ahead until we're told that we can't. Kind of like we did with spring soccer this year. We planned all the way up to first week of practice and then got shut down. So,
just to fill this out, we're not going to hire 2. We have 2 table of organization positions in the department, which we're not going to hire 2 until the middle of next year, until we're more sure about any restrictions.
Perfect. Thank you.
Any other questions for revenue? Okay, should we jump to page 40 for expenditures? So for rec expenditures, really you'll see some decent sized changes. Again, that's all due to COVID happening this year. One of the biggest ones is going to be line 41.03, which is FC soccer. We purchased all of the uniforms for the fall this year. Didn't get to use them, so when we refunded everybody for their fees, we refunded them to include their jerseys. So we have almost 400 soccer jerseys upstairs that we can reuse for next year's fall season, in the hopes that we will be able to use all of them and only have to order a small number of jerseys to kind of fill in this missed spots. And then professional services, line 41.00, we cut that in half also, just knowing that we're not going to spend the money on just the little things that we use on a season to season basis, is whether that's paper and ink to print out schedules and rosters and that sort of thing to get out to all of our coaches and parents. We don't, with cutting our season basically in half, we just don't see needing to spend as much money as we typically do on a non-COVID year. Basketball supplies, which is 31.03, we cut that significantly, just because we don't need to buy anything to really update. We purchased basketball hoops and stuff like that a couple years ago, so everything is in pretty good shape. Really, the only thing that we've got that we would like to replace are basketballs. And that's the other thing with our operating supplies, is we won't have a need for fixing nets or replacing anything really on goals, because we haven't used them in a year. So they're sitting pretty good. And then 4th of July, like I said earlier, we're hoping that we can get other groups in town to take on some of the other things, whether it's like the beer garden or the kids activities, that sort of a thing. We're hoping to recruit some outside groups, and then we would put on as spectacular of a fireworks show as we could with the money that we've requested. And then senior softball, which is 41.07, we've cut them completely because they're a self-sufficient program. The only thing that we do for them is offer registration through Active, and they have all their participants call us, they register through us, and then we just give them a roster, and they do everything else themselves. After registration, we don't hear from them unless they really need something. So we cut them out just because, we're really not doing much with them anyways. And then 41.08 Hot Rods on First Street. We've got a lot of stuff upstairs that we can reuse for the 2021 show. Whether it's, t-shirts or trophies or swag bags, that sort of thing. We didn't touch those. So we have all those upstairs. So we don't need to really, we've got a lot of things that we can reuse. And then really the only other big cut is 42.01, which is postage. And we don't plan on sending out a brochure this year. So, with COVID, we can't plan for anything. So we don't really see the point in sending out a brochure. We will send out a personalized invitation to past car show participants so that they know when it's coming, when registration for that opens. So we will still be sending stuff out, but we're not going to send out the mass amounts of brochures like we have in the last couple of years. And then I think that's about it for expenditures for rec.
Okay, if I could just chime in, for the council's benefit, as you can see, we're going to have to be very flexible with our recreation department this year. It's going to be very, very dependent on the virus guidance, vaccination availability. Lord knows what kind of curveballs will be thrown at us. So Zach he'll be on top of it. We'll be giving him lots of support, and when we think we're ready to hire those new personnel, we'll let you know.
And I have communication with other area directors, rec directors throughout the state, as well as WIA with what they're doing. So I get emails all the time that say what other municipalities are doing or what they're hoping to do, as well as what the school districts are planning to do. So we've got our finger pretty well tapped, and hopefully, we can make a lot of things work next year to get our kids out and active again.
Okay, on page 41, was there anything you wanted to remark on, Zach?
41. Not necessarily, no. The printing, I think I pretty much touched on that with our brochure and that sort of thing, which is 49.03. We're not sending out that sort of those brochures or anything this year. So the only other repair and maintenance, 48.00, we cut that, and that's just because we did some stuff to our expedition last year. So and training and seminar fees, 49.01, that we're not sending 2 people this year to anything. It'll just be me. We're not going to send a brand new recreation coordinator or anything like that to WRPA conference or anything until we know that they're around for the long haul. That's pretty much that for page 41.
Hey, Zach, I'm just taking a leap on this one, that liability insurance is if we need it, we'll spend it type of scenario, but we're just planning for events. Is that what we're doing there?
Yep, with the hopes that we can.
Well, and actually liability insurance is a distribution of costs for our overall liability coverage that we pay citywide. So yeah, that's not unique to any particular rec programs.
Any other questions on Parks and Recreation from the council? Yeah, Cliff.
I think you may have answered this, but I was napping or something. We have 2 positions that are vacant at the moment that we're planning on filling sometime. Does the budget reflect those positions, even though, does that reflect a full year salary for those, even though we're only probably going to pay for maybe half of it? Or are we figuring into it that they're only are we only budgeting for like 50% of it?
50%. Yeah, it's currently, Zach is now overseeing the Civic Center, which, as you know, is rather limited in operation. Plus, he's running the rec program by himself. And we've only budgeted for the replacement of the rec coordinator, his assistant, for half of next year.
So when we fill those positions, we'll need to do a budget adjustment?
Well, for one of them, yes.
Yeah, okay.
Hey, Cliff, to add on to that, I'm showing on 106, rec coordinator, it shows that the total wage and benefits combined is at 25 plus, whereas the annual wage is 42 something. So that shows that they're just budgeting for that portion of it.
Okay, do we have our deputy chief from the fire department on?
Were we going to discuss tourism?
Oh, sure, I'm sorry.
Yeah, so page 78.
Excuse me, getting ahead of myself.
And I guess I'll cover the revenue side, Russ, that's okay? Yeah, so
Please.
yeah, on the revenue side, yeah, we've seen very little. Actually, I've been surprised in that there's two different kinds of taxes we get from the hotel. The one is called a transient rental or hotel motel sales tax, and the other is called a TPA tax, tourist promotion area tax. And the TPA has actually picked up. It's $2 a night per room is my understanding. And I'm looking here at October revenues, and for the month of October, they actually remitted $1,500. But on the other component, the transient rental hotel motel sales tax, we received $78.48. So, and from what Department of Revenue told me was that they're allowing these hotels, I guess, motels, hotels, to just use that money and to pay it at some future point in time. So anyhow, I tried to be conservative, and that's why for hotel motel I budgeted half, and for the TPA I budgeted a quarter of the current year budget. But the way things are going, I mean, who knows, other than I'd be really surprised if this is going to get anywhere near the 44,000 that we budgeted for the current year. So currently I've only built 17,000 into the estimated revenues for next year.
And Dale, that was one of my questions, was a recapture of the taxes that have not been paid up to this point.
That was my understanding.
Are they promised at this point?
What I was told from Department of Revenue was that they're allowing them to defer payment. Okay. Not that they're forgiven taxes. But, you know, we're kind of experiencing the same thing on our utility side, where the governor's restricted now through year end that we're unable to shut off anybody's meter due to non-payment. Plus, we're unable to impose any late fees for non-payment. So, however, those directives state that they are responsible for their basic water sewer bills, but some are $400 to $500. And it's interesting in that this is about the 20th of the month when we would impose late fees. And yesterday, Doreen asked me, and I told her, go ahead and do it. We're going to send out the delinquent notices to remind people of their current balance, but we're not adding on any delinquency fees, because that would be going against the governor's directive.
Okay, Zach, you want to cover expenditures on tourism?
Yep, page 79. First, I want to say the LTAC board met on the 9th of this month and approved a few things to include the 2020 rec director salary and the 2021 rec director salary, as well as the asks for hot rods on First Street and the 4th of July. And then Russ can also speak to, they approved community days in the sum of about $10,000 up front to cover some expenditures that they foresee having to pay at the first part of the year, with the option of being able to add on more. I think we decided $5,000 more later on in the year with supporting documentation, when they had, they had these services provided and that they needed the funds to pay.
Yeah,
And
let me just clarify, up to $10,000
Up to.
at the beginning of the year
Yeah.
with supporting documentation, and they've acknowledged a need of 5,000 to 10,000 more, and so if they come back later, we'll consider it at that time. But I think this falls under the same concerns about will it happen, and so they're being cautious. But the upfront costs were hard costs that they have to pay regardless.
And then, like I said, with the approvals, they also approved a little bit with Yakima Valley Tourism. So on 49.02 dues and subscriptions, it was approved for our yearly membership with Yakima Valley Tourism as well as Yakima Valley Sports Commission. So they approved spending money on a where'd I put it? A sports tourism partnership, which gets us access to Yakima Valley Sports Commission meetings, that sort of thing, as well as the state softball tournament. So with that, they have essentially booked Carlin Park and Selah as the host site for the 2A state softball tournament through 2026. So that membership gets us those sort of royalties, if you want to call them that. And then also splits with the Selah Downtown Association for a couple page ad in their tourism guide. So you'll notice we didn't put anything really in for professional services, just because that they would typically provide our social media coverage, which is what we typically put on that line item, which is 41.00. We aren't going to continue with having Yakima Valley Tourism advertise basically for us on their website, just because we don't know what next year is going to look like. So we don't want to spend the money if we don't have it. Russ, I wanted to ask you also, for community days, for that first little bit of money, are we wanting to put that money under 41.02, which is the community days float, or 49.00, which is just miscellaneous?
Yeah, so the float is a specific account just to do the float.
Right.
So I would, and I'll take Dale's recommendation, but my thought is 41.07 is my guess.
Okay. Community days miscellaneous.
So just so I can understand this, how much are we talking about on 07?
10,000.
10,000
Up to 10,000.
up to, with receipts provided.
Yep.
We said receipts or an official quote from the vendor for
Okay.
prompt pay.
And 4902, Zach? How much?
3,331.
3,366.
Pardon me?
3,366. That includes a $35 split with SDA for the 2-page spread in their tourism guide.
I think someone stepped on you when you were giving the number. Could you give it again, please?
3,366. That includes the annual membership, the sports tourism partnership, and then a $70 fee that's split between between LTAC and Selah Downtown Association, or Parks and Rec and Selah Downtown Association, for their travel guide 2-page spread.
Can I interject here, please? The tourism, they are not going to do a travel guide for 2021.
That's correct. Sorry, I'll step in here and help out. We talked with Stephanie Gingle about that and that they aren't going to have the a new printed tour guide. They're honoring everybody's contribution to the previous tour guide, so they're going to keep handing those out. I think this is a placeholder because normally our payment for this section would be significantly more, upwards of $1,500. So it's just a small monetary amount for that guide, but they're not doing the whole thing. That is correct. The other thing to point out on this, Russ, especially, is that there is a section on page 5 of the LTAC fund application that talks about event cancellations. You had mentioned about paying upfront. That amount that they get is not it's not like if their event is canceled, that amount is not there to spend that amount, those hard costs out of their budget. The line reads, if an event is canceled due to unforeseen circumstances, all LTAC funded payments must be returned to the city, just as an FYI.
Oh, let me clarify. If they spend the money, so they don't have carryover because the community days spent the money on their insurance and spent their money on those hard costs that they had to pay up front. They had no event, they generated no revenue. So they've come to us asking for money to help with those hard costs because their carryover is very, very limited. So you're saying if the event gets canceled and they receive up to $10,000 to cover those hard costs, they would have to pay it back?
I'm saying that there's a line in the application stating about event cancellations. It's certainly up to you guys on how you want to allow those monies to be spent. For 2020, as much as was feasibly possible was given back on all parties and anybody that did it. I'm just letting you know that that's in there. And if we want to change that, we might want to amend that contract for them so that they know they can spend money on non-refundable purchases.
Yeah, I certainly don't want them to go just spending the money and not getting it back if it can be canceled. But some of those hard costs like the insurance and things like that, I mean, it'll bankrupt the community days. They're so close to using their own money for everything they can. There were several members last year who paid for money out of their pocket to handle different parts of community days. So if we require them to return the money back, my guess is we'll have to find someone else to do community days because they can't cover it without it.
Certainly, it's certainly up to council. Just want to let you know it was in there.
Okay, any other questions on tourism? Okay, let's move to fire. Page 54, I believe.
Thank you.
DC, you're ready when you want to turn on your video and audio.
Okay. All right. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm here with Deputy Chief Lang since he will more than likely inherit this budget. So, you hear us okay?
Yep, we're good. Go ahead.
Okay. So page 54, our revenue page. Anybody have any questions there? Pretty straightforward from last year.
Yes, Ms. Mattson.
Thank you. On line 342.21, fire district number 2, that's quite a bit of difference from last year. Is it just a percentage increase?
No, well, from last year to this year, you'll see a difference also in the reserves account. So we get basically the same percentage. It's just a matter of where we put that, whether we put more money into operations or whether we put more money into the reserve accounts. For 2020, coming from the district side, I put 320,000 and change into reserves. This year, we're only putting 100,000 into reserves out of that fund. So that's why it'll show a lot more here and then less in the reserve account.
Thank you.
Yeah, Kevin?
Line 361.11. Dale, is that just a drop in what interest is?
Oh yeah, it's real interesting. Most recently, Banner Bank really surprised us in that we were able to buy, I believe it was a 2-year certificate of deposit, but I bought $2 million and we're getting 30 basis points, which is less than 1/3% interest. Our money currently at the state treasury and the local government investment pool is maybe 20 some basis points, about 1/4% interest. Well, you probably heard home loans are down in the 2% range right now. Yeah. So it's very unfortunate for investors.
Any other questions on revenue? Okay, next, I'm sorry, Russ.
So my question is on, looks like our revenue is up, and I'm trying to base everything off of 2019 because that seems to be the most normal year. But our total revenue is up by $1.2 million from 2019. And so my question is on the operating transfers in, why are we needing to bring money into this account? Is it coming from other fire accounts?
Well, and Gary can handle that, but I believe he's going to tell you that's related to capital outlay, that typically capital outlay is funded out of the reserve fund.
That's correct. So for 2019, we had some larger purchases, apparatus. For 2021, there are no apparatus budgeted for, so it is a lot smaller amount.
And that total revenue coming in, is that from the new tax that we put into place this last year that the voters voted on?
A portion of that, part of that overall revenue, though, also reflects our ending fund balance for 2020.
Oh, okay.
The ending fund balance, we've created a new line item that reserves money for the operations of the department for the future. And we knew by doing this levy when we did, we were going to see that amount grow to a point where it starts tapering it off. So our fund balances here should reflect starting out with a lot larger fund than we did in 2020.
And that money, that reserved money is going to grow and then taper off as our expenses continue to climb.
Yeah. So the reserve cash and investment at that first line there, that's our operational money. So tax dollars start coming in for 2021. The unreserved is, for lack of a better term, kind of our savings account that will build until we start seeing that decline.
Thank you.
Any other questions on revenue? Okay, let's go to expenditures, Gary.
Okay, right off the bat, you'll probably see the biggest single increase we have are under the volunteer pay, volunteer officers, duty car, those kind of things. So there's a pretty significant jump there for several reasons. One, they get paid, all the volunteer membership get paid on a stipend basis for their calls for sleeper shift, duty car thing. They haven't had a stipend increase since 2008, and it was a fairly modest increase at that time. So along with some of the other programs we're looking into, we're trying to figure out ways to bolster the volunteer membership and their participation in calls and drills and those things. So we've kind of across the board figured in some stipend increases at every level to try to bolster those programs and up our participation. So that's why you see that big jump. Any questions about that part?
Yeah, Russ?
Regular pay is jumping significantly as well, by what, $70,000.
And Dale or Don might be able to address that more. The only thing we've really changed other than that, the increases in pay that we see across the board is adding our administrative assistant from about 3/4 time up to full time.
That's on page 60, Russ. There's a discussion that Gary just addressed about their front office person, their administrative person, that, like Gary said, it's been part-time where we've shared her between City Hall and the fire. They would like to have her full-time. As such, then she'll be eligible for the medical, dental, vision coverage and be paid at an administrative rate versus a part-time individual. And the increase in cost is about $70,000.
Thank you.
Any other questions on page 55?
I do have one more question. Gary, can you explain guaranteed standby?
Yes. So actually that term was created, I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago. We attempted to do a weekend program that kind of guaranteed we would have standby for calls. At that time, it didn't pan out, so it was dropped. So kind of in conjunction with the other part I was saying about the membership stipends, we're going to try to reinstitute that to help us with some daytime and possibly weekend coverage when our manpower from the crew staff is low. So it probably should have a different name, but that was already in the budget sheet, so that's just kind of where it ended up.
Okay, I believe Kevin had a question.
I did, and this goes for Dale. On some of the other funds, it breaks out pay and also medical and insurance. And this particular one doesn't appear, unless I'm missing it, doesn't appear to do so.
Line 2100, I believe, addresses.
Or is Kevin talking about page 107 where it's got the full listing of all of the individuals in the fire department?
No, I'm sorry, I didn't see.
The way the state auditor has their BARS manual, the expenditure object codes in the 10s are for salaries and wages. So fire's unique in that they have all these special ones for the volunteers and the duty car pay and all that. So total salaries are $782,000, and then below that are the 20s, which are personnel benefits. And you can see that the fringe benefit costs are $242,000, about 1/3 of the payroll costs.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, if we turn to page 56.
Okay, the first line on there on professional services, I'm sure you've all picked up on, that's a pretty significant increase from 18 to 33,000. So we added 15,000 in there. Yakima County, we've been working on for a couple of years, getting an engineer in to analyze the radio system throughout Yakima County. And all of our attempts from the state level and federal level so far has been unsuccessful. So all of the departments kind of agreed that if we could put some money into our budgets to help support getting that study done to find out what we're going to need for the future. There's been a couple of scenarios that have come out since we put this budget together, and all indications right now is not going to be nearly close to that amount for our department. But we threw that in there to just make sure we had significant funds to get this project off the ground. Overall cost for that, they're projecting at about $120,000 for that engineer study.
Any other,
Yeah, Gary, a couple years ago, I believe, you came to us and talked about establishing a contract for emergency services with the two different companies or anyone else who chose to bid on that contract. Can you tell me what happened there and if that has changed anything for your services?
Actually, it's still in effect. That RFP for a single ambulance provider has moved forward. It was put out to for questions for the proposal a month and a half ago. We've actually received questions back from 3 different companies that have expressed interest in bidding in that. So I just prior to this meeting was in a meeting. We answered all those questions for those prospective bidders. And then I believe it's December 1st is the deadline for that. And then in January 25th, 26th, anybody that wants to bid, those have to be turned into county, and it'll move forward into then review process and then contract negotiations for a successful bidder.
And that won't affect our budget, right? Those are costs to the user of the service, right?
Correct. There is no cost to entities for that service.
Thank you.
Yeah, Cliff.
This is curiosity. It really is. It's only a line 4110. What is, yeah, I just want to know what it is. I mean, it's not a major expenditure, but what is, yeah, Corp Spillman?
Okay, the Spillman is the data program that law enforcement uses and police departments use. We used to have that in all of our main vehicles, so it was a lot more expensive. We found that going to a tablet-based system for us is a lot more affordable. So we are using less of the capabilities of Spillman, so our costs went way down on that.
Okay, Jackie.
Thank you. Can we look at line items 46.02 and 46.03? Our vehicle insurance, is that because of a new vehicle?
Part of that's because we have added some new vehicles, so the costs are higher. But we also found out that a lot of our equipment we did not have replacement coverage on, which I felt was kind of important because most of our apparatus, by the time you get equipment on them, are up around that $500,000 mark. So if we had a catastrophic loss of one of those pieces of apparatus, it would be very difficult to absorb in the budget without putting us way behind the curve again. So we felt it was probably worth it with 22 pieces of apparatus that on some of those more expensive ones, we had replacement cost on them.
So compared to our 2019, is that just an incorrect number for those couple line items?
Yeah, I would say that was suspect.
So maybe in the 19,000 rather than 1,923,000
Well,
rather than.
Yeah, I hate to speculate, but I will look into that.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Let me add, for all departments, we had with the WCIA, which is our insurance carrier, we had a revaluation of property. When we really looked hard at our property, both rolling stock and land and buildings, we essentially doubled our coverage requirement when there was a true valuation. So Jamie Morford and I have been working with WCIA and looking at higher deductibles in order to keep our target costs down. And so we have managed that, but you're going to see across the board increases anywhere from 7 to 15% on some things. But we're looking at almost doubling our requirements for coverage across the board. Yeah, Russ.
Just wanted to know about trainings and seminar fees, and then firefighter awards. Is this what's on their mind there? And I actually like the idea of increasing the firefighter awards to increase incentives to keep good firefighters. But I'm curious what changes in training and awards are you looking at?
Okay, training, seminars, and fees. Of course, this has been an odd year, so we have had virtually no out of the department training, so that's way down. We do anticipate, though, with bringing on a new deputy chief, there will be some additional training classes, none of which are offered locally or very rarely offered locally. So there will be an added cost to sending someone out of town to acquire those certificates. And what was the second part of your question?
Awards. The firefighter awards that of course 2020 is different, right? But go from 5 or basically double.
Yeah, and I'm not sure. Well, I know what has to do with their plaques. You know, we get awards every year. Some years we have to replace the plaques, so the cost goes way up. Other years, all we're doing is putting an engraving tag on it, so it goes really low. So it was just some of that adjusting there. Plus, I think part of the reason too, I just remembered, all of our plaques that we had are traveling plaques, and the membership would like to take them home. So our walls were all bare and spotty. So we changed that to where the traveling trophy would stay within the station, so visitors can see that and see their friends or relatives or whatever. And then we went to individual smaller plaques that they could just keep.
Okay, Kevin.
I'm more curious about your 4804, your other miscellaneous jumped pretty significantly this year. By August, it was already close to, well, over $3,000 more than the previous year. And
Yeah.
And based on that, why this year's would be at 7, but that's a pretty good sized jump for a miscellaneous file.
Well, part of that we had to do hydrostatic testing on some SCBA cylinders this year, which put us behind. That was in itself about, I want to say $3,800 for that we had not anticipated. The other side of that is the rule changed where every year we had to have a company come in and test our SCBAs, our self-contained breathing apparatus, air packs. The rule change now is everybody's individual mask also has to be tested, which has never been in the budget before. We've never had to do that. So that about doubled the cost of that testing.
Thank you.
Okay, page 57.
Oh, well, and if I could, Jackie, I did remember on that insurance for the vehicles. At the end of 19 is when we switched coverage from our old pool to our new pool. And with the new pool, with the old pool, we typically paid in November for 12 months worth of insurance coverage. When we went to the new one, they billed us for the last 2 months of the year. So that's why it's so small. And then in January of 20, they billed us for 12 months of coverage. But in 2019, all of our vehicle insurance is significantly less than budgeted because we didn't have to pay for 12 months of coverage that fiscal year. We only paid for 2 months.
Okay, page 57.
No real significant changes there unless someone's got a question.
Page 58.
And the same there. I don't see anything significant other than that was brought up before, Jackie, on the capital. You can see where 2020 was 398,000 because we purchased a piece of apparatus. This year it's 48.7. So that's that balance transfer in that you'll see that change up front.
Okay, we'll move to capital expenditures on page 59.
Okay, so just real briefly, unless you have questions, that first one there may need some explanation. We need to reconfigure our office space. Right now we have 3 people sharing an office designed for 1. And then we've got 2 more in another fairly small office. So the plan is to reconfigure what's currently Deputy Chief's office with 5 workstations in there, and then we'll have a separate office for our Deputy Chief and then one for our training officer, I think, just to give a lot better working environment. So, and in doing that, we're going to need to we want to add a couple of computer stations as well. So.
Okay.
Gary,
Question?
yeah, what are on-spot Cahans?
Chains?
Oh,
Oh, hey, yeah, it's supposed to be chains. So
That's what I was thinking.
if you're not familiar with them, they're an automatic chain that runs under the drive tires in icy or snowy conditions.
Okay, page 60, new personnel.
Sorry, I had one more thing, Don. I see the security cameras. Is that inspired by the recent incidents? And are we hitting every single station with those security cameras?
So yeah, so I put all 4 stations in the budget because we knew that's something we wanted to do anyway. And then with everything that happened, we received, you probably heard, we received like $8,000 in cash donations. So we have already installed security camera systems at all 3 of the district stations. And with the remaining donation funds, with this additional $3,000, I can get this downtown station done as well.
Thank you.
Cliff.
I just have a question since we're here dreaming in a way, putting dreams to reality. Do you have anything on your wish list that you wish that we had the money, if you had some extra money, that what's some of the top priority kind of things that you wish we could add?
Well, probably the only thing that is a big expense that we're going to try to work in at some point. We're kind of splitting at the seams at this station, just for our membership to have room to put their gear in and do those things. So we've already talked in our 10-year plan that we might be able to push out one of the station walls to add another room, just to provide for that. Other than that, Jim's writing me notes here. So yeah, this is going to be a big expense that we don't know what's going to happen is our radio equipment when this new system gets put in. I'm sure countywide we're going to be looking at any kind of state or federal funding we can utilize for that, but that may be a larger expense. And then the only other item I can think of that we have not been able to work into the budget yet is replacing some extrication equipment. Our hydraulic tools, our newest one is almost 20 years old, and several of the others we got used from another department. So they are nearing end of life. So we have been looking at working those into the budget in the future and maybe trying to do a set a year, because I think one set of tools now is about 60,000. And we currently have 4 sets, so it's fairly significant.
Gary,
Overall, we're doing quite well.
Gary, on the communications equipment, is that going to be a mandatory purchase so we can communicate with other jurisdictions and use their repeaters? How's that going to work?
Yeah, when this new system gets all decided what it is and we figure out how we're going to get money to build it out, it will mean a radio change for all the end users. It most certainly will end up being some kind of digital frequency that most of our agencies are not equipped to deal with right now. And radios may not sound like it's going to be that big of expense, but between our portable radios and our vehicle radios, we have in excess of 100 radios in service right now. So it will be significant.
Thank you. Any other questions on this page? If not, page 60, personnel.
So again, Dale alluded to this earlier that Kylie, who we've been sharing with City Hall, we would like to get her full-time. Currently, she's only been spending, and Dale, correct me if I'm wrong, about 5, 6, 7 days a month at City Hall. So we would like to move over here and help us get some more work done in the office.
Okay, page 61.
The only thing here, just to point out to Councilwoman Mattson, that you see District 2 from 2020 to 21. That's where I was saying last year we put, or this year we put $320,000 that way, and $100 or $100,000 this year. And just so you kind of have a background on that, as I've mentioned to probably all of you multiple times, that the budget Jim and I write, we're looking at 2035 right now. So we're trying to forecast ahead and float those funds whichever way we need to make sure we have plenty of money in either the operations side or the reserve side for whatever our plans are in the future. Oh, yeah. So Jim just reminded me too, you see the total resources there. It's just clipping over $1 million in that reserve accounting equipment reserves. But as a reminder, the plan is 2022 piece of apparatus that's on our amortization thing to try to get is some kind of aerial water delivery device, not a full-blown ladder truck, but certainly something that has rescue capability type ladder. And the figures we're getting now it'll be in excess of $1 million for that one piece of apparatus without equipment on it. So as you see those numbers grow, they drop pretty fast when you write $1 million check.
And Gary, those are just being held away until that time. They're not going to be. They can't be touched for any reason.
As far as the equipment reserves, yeah, the equipment reserves is in there just for equipment, and it can be anything from, a generator to a large piece of apparatus. So it's all of our equipment reserve.
Thank you.
Okay, page 62.
Any questions there? It's pretty much the same as every year.
Any other questions here? Thanks, Jim. Gary, I appreciate your support and good work. Oh, I'm sorry, Roger.
Get unmuted here. Gary, could you explain real quick for the benefit of our newer council members how the funding works between the county and the city and the cost sharing on that?
Absolutely. So our funding for the fire department, we're kind of our own little unique world here in that we get funding from Yakima County Fire District number 2. We get funding from the city of Selah, plus those additional voter approved levies such as the EMS levy. So the way we figure that out is based on the call volume and population, both of the city and of Yakima County Fire District 2. So it gives us a formula that we can say, okay, this is what, how much funding we expect from each entity. And that came from the auditors, which, it makes sense. We can go back to the public and say, the city's not overpaying for what happens in the district and vice versa. So currently that was recalculated this year, and the city's portion is 40.1%, and the fire district's 58.9%. So it changed a little more load on the city. I think just because we're growing faster, the population has picked up a little bit. So, and with that came the call volume. So, so anyway, that's kind of how that works. It's been a great relationship. In my opinion, one couldn't live without the other.
Okay, thank you. I also wanted to point out, if I could, to this council that I've been the representative to the Fire Commissioners Board for the city for about 5 years now. And since we changed our council time, it's very rare that I can attend one of those commissioner meetings because they meet at 6:30 on the second Tuesday. So just so everyone's aware of that, I wanted to point that out. Thank you.
Thank you. Is that all, Gary? Is that all you had?
Yeah, unless there's any other questions.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Now we'll move on to police. Does anybody need a break?
All right, thank you.
Anybody need or want a break? Okay, let's move on to police. Page 20, and Dan, are you there?
I am. Sorry. Got to migrate my way through this. Just for transparency too, I have Deputy Chief Steen in the room, and I know that he worked very closely with Mr. Wayman on this budget before I got here, so we may tag team this.
Chief Chrisman, you ready to go?
Yes, sir. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. You're good. Loud and clear. If you would, start on revenues.
Yeah, so I'm looking at page 20 on the packet, if you're following along with me. The 3/10 public safety tax is the first revenue item. No change from last year. Then the criminal justice tax below that, public utility tax. Maybe it's easier if I just asked if you had any questions about these, we can move through them.
Any questions on revenue? Not much of a change, folks.
No. Page 21 is our expenditures. Again, I'll just, maybe I'll let you council drive this a little bit. So if you have any questions, I'm happy to jump in here. You can see our regular page just changed very slightly. Uniform's the same, overtime is the same. You'll see a bit of a change under longevity, and I think that's because we had a retirement of a senior sergeant. This year we chief left, and we had a senior officer who left during this time.
Yeah, Russ.
Chief, I have a question on, and maybe Dale's the best one to answer this. What's our current expenditures, since we had 2 officers that we had budgeted for that we did not pay for a portion of the year?
So
You
you're
had-
talking about salary savings, Russ? Is that what you're asking about? Yeah,
That's correct.
I don't have that number. Maybe Dale does.
Well, yeah, I'm looking on my computer screen at the October payroll expenditures. Currently, we're at 79%, and being October, should be at 83%. So anyhow, we're 3% under budget at this point. There were some additional costs in here for the retirement of our police chief, which I had not budgeted, where he got some vacation cash out. So that's kind of taking away from some of that potential savings that might have shown. So it would have been bigger than 3% variance, but true. I mean, as long as we have vacancies, that is going to cause us to come in under budget.
And we'll see the similar effect when Bill Rodriguez finally retires. I think, is he retired as of today, Dan? So
I
I
don't,
believe so.
is
Yeah.
it just today? Is it?
Yeah, I think today is the day. So his payouts will happen, but of course we won't be paying him for a month and a half for the year. So it's kind of a wash for folks that are retiring.
Okay.
Any other questions on page 21? Yeah, Cliff?
It's sort of as we turn the page. What's the difference between on page 21, we have educational pay, line 14 below, and over on page 22, 49.01, training and seminars. What's the separation between training and education?
Yeah, as you can see there, we've had nothing recorded for educational pay in the bargaining agreement, as well as the Selah personnel rules and regs. Any employee who acquires a degree while they're employed that benefits their job function is entitled to a slight stipend. For a master's degree, it's only $75 a month. Anyhow, that's what the 14 is about. There was an officer that left us a couple years ago that he was the only one earning the educational pay. And anyhow, that's why that line is there. Actually, since on the current multi-year comparison, it's 0, I should go ahead and conceal it so that you can't even see it. The 49 or 4901, that's the cost to train our current employees when they attend seminars and conferences.
Since you mentioned retirement, do we have anybody left on left one?
We have 2 retirees, but no active officers that are left one.
Chief
Russell?
Chrisman, yeah, Chief Chrisman, or well, whoever who can answer this. Professional services have been dropping year after year, and they are now at 0. What was that accounting for? And can we tell me why they've been dropping so much?
Eric?
Yeah, Eric's telling me that was when we had Jack and yeah, this was before my time. Yeah, so what ended up happening with professional services is we had a fellow that worked here before, and he was getting close to retirement, and he would take extended vacations, those kinds of things. And what we would use that line item for specifically was we had a lady who had retired out of Yakima. She was able to come in and complete our warrants and do data entry, those kinds of things. Since the arrival of Laura Conger, we just haven't seen the need to have someone here available to us. She's been doing just a great job at getting things handled.
And is that the same for office relief? Does that fall under the same guidelines?
Correct.
Thank you. I do have one just a philosophical question for you, Chief. When it comes, since Cliff brought up the educational pay, what's your feeling on education, and when I talk about education, I'm talking about trade school or college or anything like that for your officers?
Yeah, I've always been an advocate of higher education, still am. I always encourage people to get their degree. I encourage young people to get their degree before they enter law enforcement when they seek mentorship from me. So I've just always supported that.
Is this something, is this educational pay something that we could see an increase in or would want to encourage? Or, Dale talked about eliminating that line item potentially because we haven't been using it, but I guess I'm a fan of higher education as well. So I'm trying to decide if that's something we can do to help get good officers, or what are your thoughts?
Well, it's interesting because industry-wide, and maybe Mr. Costello has a feeling about this too, but what we're seeing is that more of our entry-level people might have a 2-year degree as they're coming in, or many of them that we're looking at on the front end actually have a high school diploma and maybe an incomplete degree. And so there hasn't been sort of the drive that we saw, say, 10 years ago, where people were coming in with bachelor's degrees, even master's degrees. And even on the west side, the agency that I work for, we had a person who put in with a PhD. So those are really unheard of nowadays. It's just harder to get people with higher education. So it's not a driver for us at this point, but it's something that I will always encourage within my membership.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm sorry, Mike.
Yeah, along those lines, it's all about the collective bargaining agreement also. So if that's what they want, then they can always ask for that. And yes, I agree with Chief Crispin that you get people that have a lot of education in their background, but it's very difficult to work full time, as everybody knows, and then go to school to further your education. So even in Yakima, being a much bigger agency, it wasn't until the last few years where people were actually getting stuff, degrees online and different things that were available now, where they could further their education throughout their career while they were employed. But again, it's all about the collective bargaining agreement, and if they want to do that, then that would be something that they could bargain for.
I think it's interesting to note too, and Dale hit this kind of quickly, but the way that it's written is that the officer has to get the degree while employed here in order to achieve the incentive pay, versus someone coming into the job with a degree and even after a short period of time maybe being able to collect the educational incentive pay because of the time that they put into education prior to getting the position. And then of course there are a number of cities and counties that have tuition reimbursement programs that are great initiatives to get people to go back to school and to learn and then reimburse their tuition along the way. So those are all things that are happening around us, but not necessarily here.
Okay, any further questions on this page? Let's move on to 22, please.
Yeah, I mean, this is a pretty standard page here. We didn't use a lot of travel because of COVID. We weren't sending people away for training in the last year, so that just remains the same. Insurance for the vehicles, repair and maintenance costs for everything from cars to office equipment, training seminar fees different than travel and lodging. Dues and subscriptions for us is predominantly either journals or memberships to associations for staff and officers here. Lexipol is our policy manual, and it's been described as a canned policy. We don't update it. We don't necessarily write it. We receive it from Lexipol, the company, and they provide us daily training bulletins and updates. They have a staff of attorneys who watch the district courts and the appeals courts and then make changes to the policy as things change around us. So that's the cost for 4906.
Okay. Page 23, please.
Expenditures, I mean, you can see just not a great deal of any significant change here from last year. We have our reserve unit in here as well. Personnel benefits, our crime prevention program.
Roger?
Yes, I have a couple of questions. The total for the school reserve officer, I was just curious why it was projecting that high when the schools aren't fully meeting. Are we still having the full cost of that? Or is that particular individual assigned to some other duties besides the school when he's not needed at school?
Well, we did have a meeting with the school district on that, and they requested the SRO to be back on duty. I believe it was mid-September. Was it, Eric?
September, first part of November.
Yeah. So he is on duty at this time. And
okay. And the other question I have is in reference to 521.30, crime prevention. It just seems that right now would not be a time to reduce crime prevention, and yet the as you compare to go through, we're dropping that. And of course, I see that it's Citizens Academy, but I attended several of the Citizens Academies over the past few years, and I think that's an extremely valuable resource for educating our community and helping them understand the work that our police are faced with on a day-to-day basis. And I just would hope that those things are important enough so that they can remain in the budget, at least, even if we have to move them to a different time frame.
Yeah, we agree with you, Roger. We definitely would like to have another Citizens Academy. We've had a lot of interest from the community. We are looking at 2021 as another COVID year, and with the social distancing, especially the restrictions that have just gone into place, some of the folks that I've talked to in government, even feel like that's going to go into the first quarter of next year, which is normally, as you alluded to, when we would have our academy. But that doesn't mean that we couldn't push it out to another time frame and revisit that. But as it sits right now, these were budget decisions that were made. But we won't give up on it. I guess that's my guarantee to you. We won't give up on it.
yeah, and hey, Roger, if we need to do a budget adjustment, we can, or look at where we're underspending in a particular line number and maybe shuffle it over. I think we got enough flexibility here. We can manage.
And we had budgeted last year to increase that community celebrations expense in that, and I understand that's related more to the COVID issues too, but those are in my view more important to us, that our police force is seen in the community and involved in the community, rather than just out there writing tickets or doing work. But the perception is anyway that they're not citizens. They're really just out there doing a job of enforcing law when actually it's entirely different perspective that they need to project into the community, that they're there to help people. And so I think those are very important to keeping the police force involved back in the community.
Any other, Clifford?
I have similar concerns that, and sort of not necessarily strictly in a budgetary frame of mind, but you're looking at this and we have crime prevention cut by 50% because of other reasons, not directly in your budget, but we're also seeing a reduction in recreation activities and things. And then a few pages from now, we're going to see a projected 40% reduction in detention and correction. And I'm not sure how that rectifies. If we're doing less in crime prevention, somehow it's going to end up with less incarceration also.
Well, that's really that conclusion is probably not correct. The reason, because you are jumping ahead, I was planning on dealing with the incarceration, and I know Chief Chrisman will do that. I don't believe it's real. Our drop. All right, let's just go right to incarceration. Chief, you want to explain why our budget's going down on that?
Well, I'll let Deputy Chief Steen jump in here because he was part of that discussion early on, and I'll fill in the holes where I have to. So the original plan, when I met with Dawn and Sherry, was just talking with them through and saying, hey, we're planning like COVID is not going to exist for the 2021 budgetary, when dealing with budgetary moments regarding jail. But that's not the reality of things currently. And so the decision was made that we would reduce that slightly, just simply as a result of COVID, because our jails are not taking very many people these days. They're just simply refusing them. And so what's ended up happening is, as we discussed, and Don, you may recall this as well, that we went into it understanding that this jail budget is probably going to be reduced because the jail facilities just simply aren't taking people on simple misdemeanor crimes. So we had the discussion that down the road, that once COVID opens up, this was going to be an area in which was going to need to be expanded once again to meet the demand. Did that kind of help or answer the question?
So Clifford, what we're saying is we're not, because almost all of our arrests are misdemeanor beefs.
Right.
So there's a good chance that at least through the first quarter of the year, we're going to have very low incarceration costs. Now, what's going to happen in the court when everything opens up? Are they, going to go jammed, packed to the gills? We don't believe that's going to happen. But this is one of those things where we're going to have to remain flexible. Sometime in the middle of the year, we're going to see an uptick. Hopefully, everything will be, a little easier on us with the virus, and things will get closer to normal, and our budget will be able to manage incarcerating whoever, whatever we need to do.
I realize that a portion of that is COVID related because the jails aren't taking them right now, but that seems like a big cut, and I didn't really mean to totally jump over there because we are on the crime prevention page, and like Roger alluded to, is that particularly in this time, that I think that we need to be doing more in crime prevention, in part because there is less that we can do with the bad guys, that we need to do more to encourage the good guys.
If I could maybe just speak just briefly, Chief. When we looked at this, Cliff, we were looking at the numbers. For Citizens Academy, we're talking about $500. For community celebrations, we were talking $1,000. Originally, now, and I recognize that's that's bigger than pot money here, obviously. But the community celebrations, that line item came in when we had our anniversary of Selah, our 100-year anniversary. We had requested that just specifically for that year, and then thought maybe this might be a good thing depending upon what the future looks like as to keeping that around. The Citizens Academy, everything Chief Crispin said, that is something that we definitely want to be keeping around and to make that thing go. It's just real difficult to make a Citizens Academy go in the face of the pandemic. Is that kind of helpful?
Well, I realize that what we're talking about in the scheme of the whole budget is relatively small. I just think I guess I'm trying to address rather than just the specific items that we have done before and that we already have line items for, that we ought to be thinking about ways to expand crime prevention programs, not limit those that we already have.
Yeah, sure. Russ, if you want to go ahead.
Can I add to that just as with our other events that we've planned for, like the Hot Rods on First Street, we've created a budget, assuming it'll happen, hoping it'll happen, and if it doesn't happen, we'll deal with that. I think we need to deal with this the same way, and I think if we eliminate that budget, then we eliminate the preparation that would be done for any sort of event. So I would actually voice my opinion along with Roger and Cliff that those two line items actually need to have the $500 and $1,000, and again, if they don't happen, they don't happen. It'll be the same as what happened this year. The money will be left over, but I think we need to at least plan for it and be prepared for it, and what happens.
Well, of course we agree with you. So we're trying to do some things, without that kind of funding. And I think you've heard at some of the council meetings that I'm reaching out to the business communities for one-on-ones. With the new restrictions, we've gone to a Zoom platform. So I'm going to still hold those meetings, but virtually, is like what we're doing here today. And then when things start to relax, I'll get out and go one-on-one. I've asked Deputy Chief Steen to move forward with a plan to create something that we've called Cops and Clergy, to connect with the local faith-based community one-on-one, face-to-face, because we know that there are people in our community that may not feel comfortable going to a police department and or reporting a crime. And so we can do that through their faith leadership. So there are things that we can do that don't cost a great deal of money. It just takes a little bit of our time to do that. But we're committed to connecting with Selah and building that connection stronger than maybe it ever has been. All of this other stuff, crime prevention, Citizens Academy, National Night Out, Coffee with a Cop, anything that we can do is just frosting on the cake for us. But we want to go deep. We want to go to the people who may not go to the Citizens Academy. And as Roger said, I know he and his wife have attended that, and maybe some of you have. But the people that we really want to reach out to are the people who may not even attend those sort of meetings. And some of that costs a little bit of money. we'd like to do some creative things to connect with our community. That it's not going to cost a great deal of money, but if you were willing to fund those, bring those balances back up, that would certainly help us get that job done.
Yeah, and then my last question on that, and I would agree. I don't think it takes much money to support that crime prevention, and if there's budget, then there's allowed an opportunity to be creative and use that to make a difference. It was surprising to me to see the same budget this year for National Night Out. And I realize that's more of a national thing versus a City of Selah thing, but what are our thoughts for that, and along the same guidelines of this pandemic? We're planning on that, but not the Citizens Academy or community celebration. So that was just a little odd to me, that we would plan on one and not the other.
Well, yeah, I'm going to guess, Russell, because it's an outdoor activity.
It's also
later in the year. It's much later in the year.
August, yeah. So it's later in the year. We're hoping that, we may have kind of flattened out, or the vaccines had come in, and, things were starting to level out, become a little more normalized. And we could guarantee that we'd have that event.
Okay, if we can move to page 24, please.
Again, I'll just let you peruse through this. This is our expenditures for essentially the building, facilities, any operating supplies here at the station.
Okay, folks, I have a big red circle around that thick $60,000 dot. Okay. This is where we've been talking about this for years. What to do. Are we going to build a new police station? Are we not going to build a new police station? We're getting close, not this year, but next year, where we're going to have to renegotiate with the owner, either to extend. We have 2 one-year options at the end of the lease. Do we want to extend, or do we want to get a new contract, lock them in for 5 or 7 years? So, and that has other consequences, second and third order effects. That means we're going to take a priority, and if we're going to stay in the police station, then we're going to stay in the city hall, and then we're going to do significant repairs and upgrades to the city hall. Are we going to go in another direction? Are we going to build a justice center like we were talking about? So these are the kinds of decisions that I want to bring the council around to considering early next year, through study sessions and discussions with staff on where we want to go. So it's not an emergency at this moment, but we will need to. It's more of an emergency for the city hall, because if you've walked in, you see that we've got leaks in the roof, and we've got HVAC issues, water heater issues, other outside fascia issues that we'd like to get going on. And we will, once we understand where we're going. So my recommendation is that come January time, we put together a select committee of council members to start looking at options again, and dusting off our old estimate that we received on our previous model from Trejo. Those numbers are going to be pretty far out to lunch as far as what it's going to cost to build. So we're going to have to look at maybe another study if we're looking at doing that again, or, as I said, prioritize where we're at. Now, that needs to also be held in consideration with the idea that we have a dire need to repair our sewer collection system. Also, it appears that we're going to really have to look at expanding our sewage treatment plant. And we have an emerging requirement for having the ability to treat potable water. So those are all competing priorities, along with building a new facility for the police and City Hall, that we need to balance and understand what we can pay for. And my strong suggestion is that we get after this in January and put this on our list of number one list of priorities on decisions. At least to have an idea where we're going before we end the calendar year as to our priorities.
Don, you mentioned options on the lease. Can you clarify what our current contract is and what options we have for which year?
Our current contract is $60,000 a year, triple net. And I believe our contract is over next year, 2022. And then we have 2 one-year options after that, where we can extend without negotiation with the landlord. So we have 3 more years after this calendar year, at the most.
Thank you. And are those options at an increased rate?
No. Jackie?
That was actually my question. They are not on a negotiated increase?
They are not.
Thank you.
You'll also notice on here that, you know, we're paying the taxes and insurance on the building. And so it's not just 60,000, but it's all of these other accumulated costs that go along with it.
Triple net.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, if there are no questions on page 24, 25. Any questions here? 26. $27. I'm sorry, Jackie.
Do you feel that since COVID is restricting the inmates' capabilities at our jails, that these electric monitoring costs would be more?
Well, it's an alternative to putting people in jail, if that's what you mean. So we could kind of extrapolate out that we had more opportunity to do EHM with some of the folks. It would be pretty much money well spent.
Do you anticipate that, since again COVID is restricting the amount of inmates that can be housed?
I don't know. It's really up to the judge, Jackie, with regards to that, whether or not they're willing to place somebody on monitoring.
Yeah, Jackie, if I could add to that, Judge Fall will be participating with us, I believe, tomorrow. And each case is different. He can't say what he's going to do with the next individual, but I do know that that's and the prosecutor will have something to say about that as well, about how we are going to deal with these potential candidates for this particular device. But this is, as you can see, well, this is a new program for us. It's only as old as 2018, and we're planning on using it. We're asking the prosecutor to use this more, if possible, as an option. The police chief really doesn't have a dog in this fight, really. This is really more in the courts realm. Yeah, Russ.
Since and I'm going back a little bit, since our incarcerations are going to be restricted, is there a way to turn some of these would-be incarcerations into fines and actually generate some fine money to pay for these electronic home monitoring systems? How do you?
All right, now,
That's a rookie. That's my rookie question.
yeah, and I'm going to try to answer this, but it's a better answer for the judge and the prosecutor to give. But the bottom line is the monitoring devices are paid for by the prisoner, okay? And
Unless they can't afford it, though,
if they
right?
can't afford it,
Mhm.
we may even still put it on them because it's actually cost us less to monitor it. And but that's all up to the judge. Okay, so it's gonna depend on the judge's decision on this stuff. And this is just our best estimate of what he's going to do. And I would ask you to reserve your question for Judge Fall on that particular item.
So my question was actually about when dealing with these people, these people who are going to go towards a judge. Instead of sending them to a judge, can we give them a ticket? I don't know.
That's going to be depending on the indigency. Are they indigent defendants? Have they got a pattern of ignoring fines and not
Right.
paying them? So yeah, I hate to answer that with any kind of definitive manner.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Roger?
Yes, I was just concerned that we have this, and it would appear to me that a higher percentage of these individuals are not going to pay, and so can we really project as a budget that we're going to make this kind of revenue off of that monitoring system? Because how do you make them pay if they just refuse to pay with everything else going on?
But I will add, there is the option of us going ahead and paying for it because it is actually, but it depends on the prisoner, the crime, their record. A lot of things get determined, in there. And
That would become an expense then, and not a revenue generator.
Yes, it is. It would be an expense.
The good news is we pay half of what a prisoner would pay for the device. So we get a reduced rate on the city side versus what they would pay the vendor for the same device. The other thing I was going to tell the council is I attended a virtual seminar today for the Washington Association of Sheriffs and Police Chiefs, and they talked about the 17 big ticket items that are dropping in Olympia in the next legislative session. And one of the ones that's got a lot of steam right now is sentencing reform. There's also a legislator that has grabbed onto the Oregon legislation to decriminalize illicit drugs in the state of Washington. So it's very possible that within the next year, we're going to see some significant change. I will tell you that we just received a letter from the prosecutor the other day asking us to not cite for some lower level crimes, or not put them in through the court system, but cite them at a lower crime level. So, there's a lot of things there are a lot of moving pieces with regards to what we used to do and, what we're doing today and what we may be doing tomorrow, just to kind of let you know that none of this may look the same moving forward.
All good news, huh? Okay, page 26.
That was 26.
I'm sorry, 28. I didn't have my reading glasses. I'm sorry. Any questions here, folks? Okay, moving on, page 29. Nope, you can pass right over that. Moving on up to page 31, animal control. That fall under Chris Knox's duties.
Correct.
Any questions on that, folks? We did do a bit of a investigation as to whether we could work directly with the Humane Society and not house some of these animals that we pick up. It really wouldn't work out. We still have a relationship with them, but we think that going forward as is with our current model is the way to go. Mr. Knox does a great job.
Do you want to look at page 46, Mr. Wayman, or if there's any questions about our capital expenditures?
Yeah, let's go forward. If you could jump forward, folks, to page 46, that would be capital expenditures and new personnel. In this case, just capital expenditures. Go ahead, Chief.
Yeah, so our new patrol vehicle is over in Seattle. It's being set up at the Ford dealership there, making road ready. So we'll have custody of that relatively soon. I don't have a timeline for you today, but they're typical dealership, right? Well, we're working on it every day. Our computers are really dated, and so we've put together a package to replace desktop computers and monitors within the workstations here inside the building, and that's the $15,000 projected cost for that. Due to some of the intelligence that we'd received about protesting and possible Antifa issues, we wanted to get some less lethal applications, and so these 40mm launchers theoretically would be in the sergeant's vehicles, used if need be. Tasers and holsters, our tasers are very old. They are not supported. The platform that they operate on are not supported anymore. The parts are hard to get. The taser cartridges are nearly impossible to get and very expensive. Because Taser International has a newer, better version, and so it has multiple launch applications instead of just a single application. And so we have planned to replace all of our tasers here, and then of course the cartridges are in addition. That'll also include updated training on the new platform, and so those are our expenditures this year.
Any question on expenditures for the equipment? Yeah, Kevin?
I don't so much have a question as to a suggestion that some of the computers be put on a rotation basis that's not 14 computers at the same time, and rotate them out on a three or 4 year annual maintenance program.
Absolutely. We'd like to have a, I haven't even talked to Don or anyone about, trying to build up some bank, to replace some of these things, including, vehicles or weapons or anything like that. But I know a lot of agencies have gone to that. But I appreciate your comment about not taking them all out of service. There just hasn't been, I don't think, much planning, at least in this building, with regards to doing what you said. But we could probably get IT services to give us an assessment if we have some devices here that could last a couple more years, and then sort of rotate them out, stair step them or stagger them, if that's what you're suggesting.
And Kevin, I think what we have been doing, and what his predecessor was doing, was looking at Fund 170 as it built up and laying out the purchase priorities there for equipment. And I agree that maybe we could do a better job at more of a granular understanding of what's needed. I think the previous focus was really around cars, vehicles, and maybe we need to expand that with a clearer understanding of what we need in the next 5 years at the PD. Yeah, Mike.
Chief Chrisman, just a quick question about the launchers, the 8100. Does that include the training for the equipment also?
Involved in there. That did not include training, like the training budget and the training costs or the training rounds we had enough there to be able to do this. Deputy Chief Steen was sort of the architect of this with Mr. Wayman, but what he's telling me is that we felt like we had enough money in the training budget to cover the training for the launchers. But this is just for the equipment.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And I can't remember, did we talk about training ammo too?
We did. Yes. We're sitting on a food stock out ammunition. That's why we believe that the training ammunition for the 40 launcher. We're doing pretty well with our ammo stock right now, and so again, we felt like we could take some money to get the training ammunition for the 40 millimeters as well. So again, that's just the equipment. We have money that we can allocate to the equipment and training.
When we do the Citizens Academy, can we all have training on these launchers?
Are you talking about standing down range?
All right, I'll withdraw my question.
Okay.
Thank you, Chief. Do we I'm sorry, Cliff, go ahead.
I want to ask the chief the same question that I asked the fire chief, that I know that you're new and still probably figuring out what exactly we all have and what your wishes and dreams might be. But if we were able to get you any more money, what are some of the things that you have on your wish list that ended up on the editor's floor?
Well, Mr. Wayman talked about a new building. We would certainly, celebrate that. This work, I think I heard Chief Hannah say you felt like he was bursting at the seams. We really have acquired every closet space and every little inch of this building. And if you've been through here recently, you know that our patrol report writing room is right in the middle of everything. And, there's just so many things wrong about it. When I tested for this position, Cliff, you may remember one of the questions was about accreditation, and this building is going to be a huge obstacle if this agency ever decides to move forward on accreditation for security purposes and the way it's laid out, things like that. So I would support and do everything I could to provide information to council with regards to a new public safety building. I will also tell you this: I have some real concerns with some of the vehicles that we have. We have vehicles that are, over 125,000 miles. I've asked Chris Knox to look at, what our maintenance costs are on the vehicle and whether or not they are really hemorrhaging, and at some point, you kind of have this a balancing act between a car that's safe for an officer to respond code to calls. And so, but those are big ticket items. I don't, you're obviously not going to find that money, but at least I can kind of plant the seed to get you to maybe think about, either a revolving account or getting something underway to get some of those big ticket items. The other thing that I talked to Mr. Wayman about the other day is, attracting new officers to the city of Selah. And, our pay is kind of in the middle band. And I know I'm kind of getting down a rabbit hole, but I just kind of want to let you know some of the things that we're dealing with here with regards to money, and getting the right people on the right seat in the bus, and moving this agency forward.
incentive pays and things like that to get people, attract them and then keep them here, or other positions. So there's a lot of things, Cliff, and I don't mean to sort of have a landslide on your desk there, but there are a number of things that we can be looking forward in the future for, to make this just a real destination agency.
Well, I was sort of looking for a landslide, actually. And since Don pointed out that I jumped ahead when I brought up incarceration when we were talking about crime prevention, I'll just blame him for jumping on talking about new facility, because buildings is on the schedule for tomorrow, and I was going to bring it up then. You heard at least three of us, and I'm sure that the other ones at least are on board too, is that we want to support you and everything, and we would love to get you a new facility, as well as a new facility for administration. I sort of surprised, actually, not real terribly, because like I said, I still expect you're still in some degree of getting acclimated to what we already have. I know you have support, at least for some of us on council, well, you heard from three of us talking about crime prevention and everything, that we do support. We do support the police department and want to do what we can do to make it better.
And we appreciate that. Thank you.
Do we have any other questions for the chief before we cut him loose? Thank you, Chief Crispin.
Thank you.
Dale, we are about a half hour ahead of schedule. Would you mind covering page 1 and going through the different funds in the front of our budget?
Sure.
Okay.
So let's see.
Page 1.
Yeah, so the first 8 pages are just a summary of the funds. Page 1 is a detail of the general fund, which just shows a snapshot of the beginning fund balance, cash and investment carried over from this year into next year, what we estimate. And then it shows revenues by departments. 11 is legislative or council. And then it goes down the list: court, executive, finance, legal, facilities, police, detention, emergency services, pollution control, animal control, code and building, planning, substance abuse, which is just a payment we have to, it goes to the Yakima Community Services. It's a percentage of the liquor tax for, they use it for alcohol related programs at the county. Then we have our rec program. 76 is parks. And then we have what we call our non-departmental, where we show transfers in from other funds and then transfers to other funds. Our biggest revenue is under the non-departmental because of the taxes, property tax and sales tax. Then we show, so it's the revenues for those departments that have revenue. Then the next column is the actual operating expenditures, which is salaries, charges, utilities, miscellaneous. And then we have capital outlay costs. And currently in the general fund, we only have 3 different departments anticipating capital expenditures. And so for the current year, we estimate that we're going to have revenues 38,788 in excess of the expenditures. So, that definitely is a balanced budget.
Could I,
Go
Dale,
ahead.
could I jump in? Now, I know Kevin, has mentioned it, and maybe some of the other council members. I know Dan is talking about setting aside money for equipment. I just want to bring your attention to transfer from Fund 170 CE Equipment Reserves. That's 147,279, and then you go transfer to Fund 170 Equipment Reserve. That's 126. So every year, I'm in a position where I have different department heads, public works and police mostly, wanting to come in and purchase more equipment. So I have to keep that Fund 170 buoyant. I have to keep it, filled with enough cash to get to the next year or to buy the big thing next year. So unless we want to start transferring more money into 170, buying more bigger ticket items or more equipment is gonna be more difficult unless I can get more money. So go ahead, Dale.
Well, and then back on page 45, which summarizes the non-departmental, towards the bottom, you can see the transfer out detail. And we actually made a significant increase for the current year, where this year it's 126,000. Prior to that, it was only 85,000 that we were putting away for all of the general fund departments. So yeah, we increased that by 50% this year.
So anyway, thanks, Dale. Were there any questions on this summary page?
I have a question about transfers out. What that money is that's just from that non-departmental budget? That's where that transfer out's coming from?
Correct. Into Fund 170, yeah.
Okay. And then we talked earlier this year about projected sales tax revenue approaching $500,000. Where is that money going? And is there an opportunity to put some of that away as well, or more of that away if we're already putting some of it away?
Yeah, your sales taxes are back on page 99, where it shows how we currently anticipate to distribute that money.
So as of right now, we're showing
86% to the general fund.
Okay. So we're let's see, but that's through August, right?
Well, no. That's the estimate for next year.
Okay.
Well, and for the current year, 2020, the budget provided for 86.4%. But the approach we've always used on the sales tax is that currently our sales tax receipts, I believe, are coming in excess of budget. So we're going to end up where we will only give the city street fund the 125,000 that we budgeted, the civic center the 63, and anything that would come in excess of budget will supplement the general fund currently listed at 1,190,000. So that's where last year Finance Committee had directed me, based upon the strong sales tax receipts, we did a transfer over to our contingency fund, Fund 140. And so for the current year, it looks like we're going to have the same ability, knock on wood.
Yeah, and I guess that's what I'm alluding to is whatever that excess sales tax is there a way to continue putting that away? And what's the appropriate use of that contingency fund? Is it as
my understanding is it's wide open. It's up to council.
Right.
It's just kind of like a savings account. Some people might call it rainy day fund.
Okay, that's all I got.
Mike?
This is just a question because I'm new, but so I see with the fire department and Chief Hanna, is it, and then the police department, and I see that there's a reserve for equipment for the fire department. Is it just the, I guess, management or budget styles that they have that they're able to do that? Because I see also now the police department and the capital outlay is looking at 77,000 for one vehicle, which it is probably about I'm sure the going rate now. But so if they have 14 vehicles, and I don't know that to be exact, I'm just going off the number of people. So they're just changing those out every 14 years.
Well, and they do have a schedule, Mike, with an anticipated replacement on those vehicles. Currently, in our one fund 170, we intend to end this year with $526,000, of which a portion of that is identified for the police. That's where I haven't given you that detail. And I do have a supplemental page that I create every year that attempts to show the carryover as to how much money they're starting with, how much of this 126,000 is allocated for police, and then supposedly that is adequate to, well, some years they wanted to buy 2 vehicles instead of 1, and that just didn't work because that was like 150 grand with equipment. And so we've had to deny those requests, or at least the administrator has.
Well, and to explain it, we've really moved to about 1.5 vehicles a year. So there'll be some years where they get 1 vehicle and other years where they get 2.
Oh, okay. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Kevin?
Mike, the one thing the big difference between the two is the fire district has the option of going out and asking for more money from the community, whereas the police department doesn't have that. So that was a lot of this planning that they went in before we approved them to go out to a vote. All this planning and the equipment and all of that was part of the reason they were going out for that.
Thanks, Kevin.
Hey, Don, can you hear us?
Yes.
I'd like to clarify that for the council. The fire department doesn't just have the option to go out and get more money. We can ask the taxpayers to get a voter approved increase, but we're still bound by the percentages of what the district and the city provide to our budget. It's that we can't just go ask for more and receive more. It's based on a percentage. So if the city can't afford to give their percentage to our budget, then it reduces what the district pays, and vice versa. So it's not exactly like what you're saying, Kevin, but we do have options to ask the taxpayers to approve more money, but it's not quite that easy, I guess, is what I was trying to say.
Okay, Dale, if you wouldn't mind, are there any more questions on the summary page? Maruto Fund, if there's any doubt, we have the adequate funds to continue paying the bond. You'll still see this year for the next few years, but we have the money in the bank to pay the bills. Okay, Dale, page 2.
Okay, so then the following pages, page 2, 3, and 4 are the other operating, what we consider operating funds: fire control, street, civic center, transit, tourism, and then water, sewer, solid waste. So on the fire control, they're going to end up almost 500,000 stronger than what they start the year with, their ending fund balance. The street fund, unfortunately, it's spending down by 36, but still very healthy for the street fund, in my opinion, at 164,000. For the street improvement fund, that 103,000 is just money that's been paid in advance by the school district for a future traffic signal improvement. So anyhow, that fund, the revenues always equal the expenditures. In the Civic Center fund, we anticipate currently an increase of about $40,000. And I guess that's based upon the current non-funding of part of the salary costs at that location, at that fund. In the transit fund, they're going to spend down $36,000. tourism spending
Oh,
down
Dale,
5 grand.
Dale, hang on. On transit, we're transferring out some funds over to streets and sidewalks. We're looking to improve a lot of sidewalk next year, and we can use transit money for, I believe, within a quarter of a mile of each bus stop. So we're gonna inventory our sidewalk. Mr. Haney and I have talked about this, and we're gonna try to use some of those funds to improve our sidewalks. Yes.
Are we going to add new bus stations as well in order to have more sidewalk to that budget?
No, there's no currently. No. No. I'm sorry, Dale, go ahead. You're on a roll.
Oh, you're good. So, yeah, on the tourism fund, well, based upon what was estimated, and now that changed with some of these new numbers, they're going to end up with less money than they're going to start the year with. In the water fund, it's actually currently budgeted that the fund balance will go up slightly by $68,000. The sewer fund shows it's going to increase its fund balance slightly, but as Don's indicated, unfortunately, there's going to be some pretty major future facility improvement costs for the sewer fund. Solid waste is going to spend down $28,000, even though we currently have implemented a proposed 3% rate increase. But still, you know, since we contract with Basin Disposal, that $230,000 is a very healthy fund balance for the solid waste fund because they don't have to replace any equipment or anything like that with that money. The other pages 5 through 8, are the various reserve funds, so to speak, or special revenue funds. 113 is a legal requirement where I have to put a portion of the fuel tax into a paths and trails fund, and we're supposed to expend that within 10 years of receipt. So currently that fund's got only about $3,400 in it. 115 is a reserve fund for the street improvements. It's going to end the year at $86,000. 140 was that savings account I talked about, contingency reserve, and it's currently only has interest earnings, but that may change based upon how we end 2020 sales tax wise. That may increase. 150 is the fire department's equipment reserve fund. You can see that's it increases significantly, and as Gary and Jim mentioned, they're saving up for some fairly major equipment purchases down the road. EMS is a dedicated fund for emergency medical service equipment, and it currently has $27,000. Fire usually uses that just to buy special medical response type equipment. Fund 170 is our current expense equipment reserve for police and city hall and the parks department. Well, and as well as the building department, they have a vehicle. Now planning has a vehicle that we are setting aside money for replacement. As well as out back here, there's 2 city staff vehicles. 180 and 181 are police-related reserve funds where the court imposes assessments against defendants. I guess it's only related to drug-type crimes, and then the court sends us the money, and it goes in here and can only be spent for crime-type programs. Our Capital Improvement Fund 301, that's our real estate excise tax that we receive on real estate transactions, and we're required to spend that on facility improvements, capital improvements. And yeah, it's amazing how that's grown lately. We've seen some very nice dollar-wise real estate transactions in the community. 303 is the last of the fire reserve funds. That's a building reserve. That's actually kind of a leftover from the construction of the fire station. When I first got here about 20 years ago, we used a portion of this. When they first constructed it, the upstairs dormitory wasn't completed. It's like some people building a house, but they have an unfinished basement. Well, we had an unfinished upper level. And so about 20 years ago, they completed that. And so anyhow, that took down what money basically was left in this building reserve fund, and currently sits at about $40,000. Then we have a reserve fund for the Civic Center for future capital improvements, and it's currently at 37. Just a few years ago, we started budgeting 10,000 a year out of the Civic Center fund to try to build this up to a decent level. 310 is our future police facility, city hall money potentially, and currently we're at $1 million. This is built up primarily from land sales, is the biggest source of money for that fund. And then we have the 2 reserve funds for water and sewer reserve. And Joe attempts to set money aside for future needed improvements in the water system and the sewer system.
Any questions on all that? Yeah, Clifford?
Is 303, is that the right one? Yeah, the fire building reserve, is that $36,000 something that would be able to be used towards the addition of a room to the station that the chief talked about?
Yeah, certainly.
And sort of picking up on what Mike was saying, I'm not sure I understood the answer, is why is it that the fire department has separate reserve accounts, but whether it's for equipment and things, but the police department is in the 140 contingency reserve?
170.
170. Yeah, 170.
Yeah, 170 is current expense equipment reserve. Which
and I understand you said that police has a separate line item, so to speak, in that budget, but why do we separate fire reserve out into a separate account, but we don't separate police equipment reserve into a different separate account?
Sure. Well, fire is unique in that they're fire, they're nothing else. Current expense is police, parks, planning, building, executive.
And it's all tied to the general fund.
General fund. And fire is 103, fire fund. Yeah. So their reserve fund supports fire. Our reserve fund supports all of those departments within the general fund.
If I understand that properly, Cliff, it's because of that relationship that we have with the district that we have to maintain separate revenue sources and expenses, and we have to partner with them on things. So we have to be very cautious. Whereas on the police / anything else in the budget, it's a matter of the priorities and how we put them on the list.
Let's see if Gary's still listening. Yeah, I have law enforcement background. You don't have to tell me that firemen are unique.
Hey, this is Jim at Fire. Gary is not here. He actually ran bills over to Dale at City Hall. But if I remember right, Dale, and I wasn't here at the time, but I think there's also a portion of that is because of the public safety utility tax was advertised to the public as using that for equipment reserves. So we have dedicated that to a fund to show the public that this is what we're using those tax dollars for.
Well, the public safety tax, 8.5% utility tax, is in the municipal code, and it specifies the allocation between police and fire. And yeah, I mean, if it's fire related, we have to be able to account for it as fire. And since the state auditor 103 is the fund number for the fire control fund, the 100 series or special revenue fund, and it's a completely different critter than the general fund.
Right, but I think just to help understand the question, I think is, as it was sold to the public that they voted on, that portion of that money would go for fire equipment reserve dedicated to that, if I remember right.
Yeah, and actually they didn't vote on it. It was a council-matic
Oh, okay.
action. Yeah, because it's a utility tax. Yeah.
All right.
But yeah, in the municipal code, it clearly spells out how much of that public safety tax is for fire versus police. And since and maybe even then it says fire capital, but the adopted approach has been to put the fires portion into that fire equipment reserve fund.
Okay, Kevin.
The capital improvement fund, can that be used for new construction as well?
Sure, yeah. My understanding, it's got to be a infrastructure, a capital improvement. So
Yeah, and unfortunately, I would have loved to see a purchase on that last remaining Maruto property we had, but the potential buyer passed and bought another property.
But we could, if we do decide to build a new building, we could use that capital, the capital improvement fund.
Yes. Okay, that's it for today, ladies and gentlemen. Look forward to seeing you at 1:30 tomorrow. My takeaway from this evening is that I owe you an org chart with the position and name. And would you like to have their salary on there, their monthly salary? I'll try to insert that. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.